Alright, so in this week's Nootropic Study of the Week, we're looking at the effects of different metabolic agents on cognitive performance, including pyruvate, oxygen, glucose, L-carnitine, and creatine. And this is a review, not a placebo-controlled study, so there will not be any participants or specific tests or any specific dosages that are reviewed here. Instead, the review is about the underlying mechanisms of brain energization and how these compounds may be able to help in improving that. Now, both oxygen and glucose seem to have a U-shaped dose-response curve, which entails that it has a negative impact if you use too much of it, and also a suboptimal impact if you use too little of it. But if you have the right amount, the specific perfect dose for you, then you'll get perfect result on your cognitive performance. And oxygen and glucose then have these U-shaped dose response curves on both attention, measures of attention, and also on memory. And oxygen's therapeutic window is quite small, so you'll have some acute effect if you administer full concentration oxygen to your lungs, and so that will, in comparison with the air that you're breathing that is not full of oxygen, there are other particles in the air that aren't oxygen. And so if you have 100% oxygen for a couple of minutes, then you will probably have an increase in cognitive performance. And glucose also acts acutely, but in opposite to oxygen, glucose does not seem to have any long-term positive impacts on cognitive performance. Oxygen does seem to have a long-term positive impact on cognitive performance in that you can probably use it for acute cognitive enhancement very often. This is of course not very well researched, but that seems to be the case. Now glucose, you build tolerance to it, so it does not seem to be a very sustainable way of enhancing cognitive performance, because you start building insulin resistance and then your body cannot really use the glucose and you need more to get the same effects, which is just not a nice situation to be in. So glucose, maybe use it if you are in a situation where you really need to perform, because then it can acutely enhance your cognitive performance, but in the long term it's not sustainable to do it every day. Now pyruvate is a source of energy, one could say. It's a compound that is involved in energy production when glucose is lacking. So if you administer pyruvate to someone when their glucose levels are depleted, then at least in rat models, this is not on humans yet, one could have their cognitive deficits attenuated. So the cognitive deficits in these mice were removed entirely. There were no cognitive deficits after pyruvate administration when there was a lack of glucose in their system. Pyruvate is also neuroprotective, which entails that it can help neuronal cells survive in, for example, excess glutamate, which can lead to excitotoxicity. So when there is too much glutamatergic activity, there could occur a state which is called excitotoxicity, in which neurons die very quickly, and pyruvate then has the potential to protect neurons from dying, so that the survivability of the neurons, it is better. And creatine and ALCAR also seem to have neuroprotective effects, and they also seem to have some cognitive performance enhancing effects. But all of these compounds and all of these metabolic agents are really, really early relative to what is possible in terms of the level of evidence that we have for their efficacy or lack of efficacy. So we really do need more research on these compounds. But overall, it does seem like they don't have all that much of any benefit to most people. They do seem to benefit people who have neurological diseases or for any other reason have deficits in any of these compounds. And they also seem to be extra helpful in stressful situations. So if you are working hard or challenging yourself physically, then these compounds may be of help for you. But probably not if you're taking care of yourself and not stressing yourself out in terms of work. Maybe then you could use them only when you do have to really up your ante in terms of work. But they don't seem to have all that much of any benefit to the average Joe doing the average Joe thing. Now, if you want to learn more about any of these compounds, such as creatine or ALCAR, then you can go into the Nootralize app and find those nootropics there. And there you'll be able to find all of the healthy human placebo-controlled studies that have been conducted on these compounds. So we take into consideration only the highest level of evidence when we recommend you nootropics and inform you about nootropics. So go into the Nootralize app to learn more about these nootropics. And if you do decide to use any of these compounds, I do really wish that it works for you, that you do get these improvements in cognitive performance from these metabolic agents.